If you watched this video, please share and hit subscribe button. So the country has received a stream of further messages of support as several European leaders travel to Kyiv for the commemorations of the Holodomor, which Ukraine considers was genocide. It comes as Ukraine grapples to repel invading Russian forces and deals with massive power outages across the country after waves of Russian airstrikes on vital infrastructure. In November 1932, Soviet leader Stalin dispatched police to seize all grain and livestock from newly collectivized Ukrainian farms, including the seed needed to plant the next crop. Millions of Ukrainian peasants starved to death in the following months from what some historians say was premeditated mass murder. On the 90th anniversary of the 1932–1933 Holodomor in Ukraine, Russia's genocidal war of aggression pursues the same goal as during the 1932–1933 genocide, the elimination of the Ukrainian nation and its statehood, Ukraine's foreign ministry said in a statement. The political and ideological narratives of the Stalinist era, in particular presenting the image of the so-called hostile West and the denial of the existence of Ukraine as an independent state, are actively reproduced today. The Russians will pay for all of the victims of the Holodomor and answer for today's crimes, Andriy Yermak, the head of Ukraine's presidential administration, wrote on Telegram. Once they wanted to destroy us with hunger, now with darkness and cold, President Volodymyr Zelensky wrote, also on Telegram. We cannot be broken. Decroux pledges Belgian support. Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo, making his first visit since the start of the Russian invasion, stressed the importance of standing with Ukraine now that Russia is turning against the country's population and infrastructure. He and Zelensky signed a declaration of support for Ukraine's membership with the EU and NATO. The Ukrainian president thanked the Belgian leader for the unwavering support, and in particular noted that Belgium is the leader in the volume of frozen Russian assets, 50 billion euros, even more. The Prime Minister tweeted to say that Belgium was releasing new humanitarian and military aid, and was one of the first countries to back Zelensky's initiative to get Ukrainian grain to world markets. Belgium is to provide additional financial support of 37.4 million euros for Ukraine, according to the Belga news agency. The Prime Ministers of Poland and Lithuania, Mateusz Morawiecki and Ingrida Imoni, two of Ukraine's closest supporters, met with their counterpart Denis Shmyhal. The three leaders issued a joint statement after the meeting stressing their continued support for Ukraine and denouncing Russia's actions. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced in a video an additional 15 million euros in aid to support Ukrainian grain exports, disrupted by the war. The German parliament moved on Friday to define the Holodomor as genocide. French President Emmanuel Macron also pledged an additional 6 million euros for grain exports, which are vital for the supply of many countries in Africa and Asia. We have chosen to act in solidarity with the most vulnerable countries. Russia, on the other hand, continues to use hunger as a means of pressure and food as a weapon of war, he said in a message. Holodomor, Germany to call famine that killed millions of Ukrainians in the 1930s a genocide. History repeating itself. At the Holodomor Memorial Center in central Kyiv, a dozen Orthodox priests dressed in black and silver robes gathered on Saturday for a religious ceremony to honor the victims of the famine. It was an artificially created genocidal famine. Now that we are living through this massive war launched unprovoked by Russia against Ukraine, we see history repeating itself, 38-year-old Pope Alexander Chmerjan told AFP. Among those gathered to commemorate the victims of the famine, lawyer Andrei Savchuk, 39, spoke of an irreparable loss for Ukraine. Stalin's system, the repressive state, wanted to destroy Ukraine as a nation. Today we see that Stalin's efforts are being continued by President Vladimir Putin, he said. Russia rejects classification of the famine in the early 1930s as genocide, arguing that there were not only Ukrainian victims, but also Russians, Kazakhs and others. On the front line, Prisoner exchanges between Russia and Ukraine continued on Saturday, with 12 people freed on the Kyiv side. Moscow announced that it had recovered 9 of its men. In Dnipro, in central Ukraine, a Russian bombardment injured at least 13 people, according to regional governor Valentin Reznichenko. In the capital, where part of the population has spent the last 3 days without electricity after massive Russian strikes on Wednesday, the municipality announced that it had restored 75% of the power supply and 90% of the heating, with temperatures approaching 0 degrees Celsius.